Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Clayton Baker, Senior Fellow with Independent Medical Alliance. Welcome to tonight's weekly IMA show. Tonight, we've entitled it The State of the Movement, Building a Future of Honest Medicine. Tonight, we're streaming on multiple platforms, including the dreaded YouTube. After years of being censored, we're back on YouTube, so we're especially grateful to have this conversation open and accessible on multiple platforms. Tonight, we have two very powerful voices joining us, two men who represent two of my personal favorite organizations, present company excluded, of course. IMA is very near and dear to my heart as well, but Brownstone Institute, we have Jeffrey Tucker, founder and president of Brownstone Institute, and we also have Michael Kane from Children's Health Defense. And together we're going to try to explore a little bit where the medical freedom movement stands at this point in time and how we can collaborate between organizations like IMA, Brownstone, and Children's Health Defense and others to build this movement into a permanent part of American life and hopefully international life after the terrible abuses of the COVID era. So I'm going to start with Michael because you're a little bit pressed for time tonight, I understand. But I want each of you to give me an answer to this question from your vantage point, whether it's the advocacy that CHD has been doing for decades now, or whether it's Brownstone and the policy work that you've been doing, Jeffrey, for the last 5 years. Where do you see the greatest momentum right now in the medical freedom movement? I'll start with you, Michael.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much for having me on, Clayton. Jeffrey, it's always great to be absolutely anywhere with you. So it's great to be here virtually with you. The momentum in the medical freedom movement, I could not be more excited about what we're seeing now. You know, before we came on air, Clayton, you and Jeffrey were having a conversation about blue states and what's happening, you know, in especially deep blue cities and such like that, and where there is such a need to come together and to find like-minded people. I'm in New York, so you know we're definitely working on making sure we're finding like-minded people and fighting back and pushing back. And to give you an example, we've been fighting back bad bills here for over 6 years, and we've stopped all bills related to taking away your rights, especially when it comes to vaccines, in New York over the past 6 years. For the first time now, as we're starting to look at the new session in New York at Albany coming up this January, we have a bill to restore the medical exemption of vaccination sponsored by two Democrats. So we have not had that before. If the bill's not sponsored by a Democrat in New York, it has no shot. If it is in both houses, it actually can move forward. And so we're seeing people start that allies we normally wouldn't expect are starting to see, wait a minute, things were a little crazy through COVID. My voting base has changed a little bit. And I think we really, really need to capitalize on that. Children's Health Defense, Brownstone, so many organizations, I think, are paying attention to that and are taking the needed next steps to make sure that we are capitalizing on those silver linings. I'm extremely optimistic in heading into 2026 personally.
Well, that's tremendous news that I was unaware of. I'm a New Yorker as well, way upstate, but I'm a New Yorker as well. And my biggest concern right now at the state level is the issue of the assisted suicide bill, which is sitting on Kathy Hochul's desk. So I had a bit of a more I don't know what the word is. I don't want to say pessimistic. I try very hard not to be pessimistic, but a bit more guarded viewpoint. It was very encouraging to hear what you just said about a little bit of Democrat interest in vaccine rights and freedoms as well.
And that bill you mentioned, you're 100% right about. A good friend of mine, John Gilmore, who's run the Autism Action Network for 20 years, is very scared about that bill because there's basically zero protection for people with disabilities. And it's such a slippery slope. Once you do this well-intentioned bill for those who are suffering, the doors open and you really, you really can't put put that genie back in the bottle. So I agree with you. That's a scary one. Hopefully, Kathy Hochul, come December, when she usually looks at these things and decides to sign it or not, hopefully the pressure will be there for her to not sign it. And hopefully she will see that that's not going to help her in her reelection bid. So, but I'm with you on that, Bill, for sure.
Very
Yeah.
well. Full disclosure, I just wrote a piece about that and sent it to Jeffrey yesterday. So hopefully
Great.
we'll
It's
have
coming up.
something out to comment on.
It's
So
coming up.
turning to you, Jeffrey, where do you see things as? Brownstone's had so much success
Mm,
in its short life.
mm.
From the Great Barrington Declaration onward, not only with policy influence, but even to the extent of having people affiliated with it in positions of within the government. So there's certainly been some victories. Where do you see things standing right now? What do you see as the biggest positive momentum, and what challenges might you see?
I will say, first of all, I'm extremely happy with how well Brownstone, IMA, and CHC are working together. I've been in the nonprofit world a very long time. I've never seen this level of cooperation. We all have our specializations. We have our things that we do really well, but I just love how all of our efforts are working together. We're constantly retweeting each other and republishing each other on all of our venues and social media. And these are three organizations that 10 years ago, well, we didn't exist. IMA didn't exist. CHC was considered to be, a third rail untouchable. And now, but so many legacy institutions, I'm just going to be blunt about it, utterly failed during the COVID years. And now here we are in 2025, and our three organizations, and there are others, are really growing in influence, really, and leading the way. Secondly, I want to say something else that's rather important to all of our international friends, and that is that I'm really proud of America today, because in so many ways the world is looking to the United States to lead the way out of this dark, dark period back into the light of freedom and civilization. And I think America, as a country, has a lot of moral culpability during the COVID period. Things went really badly, and
Think?
everybody depended on the United States to maintain freedom, rally around the Bill of Rights. It didn't happen. And when America fell, then everybody else that's my strong impression, is that when the United States fell in 2020, everybody else just kind of relented. So that's a burden on this country. On the other hand, it seems as if the United States is similarly leading the world out of this darkness into a re-embrace of the Bill of Rights and embrace of the great, great, wonderful Declaration of Independence, the freedom of individuals to make their own choices, and back into the light of freedom and civilization. I feel it happening every day. And what Brownstone specializes in is taking on the science, the experts, right? I mean, that's sort of what we've that's kind of our niche, and every day we're running articles debunking bad science coming out of the journals, out of the agencies, out of the experts, the so-called experts that led us into the darkness, and we're just chipping away at them one by one. And to have a venue to do that is really fantastic. IMA, CHD, and Brownstone all provide that. But what I'm most excited about is that we have the personnel, we have the minds, we have the experts, people like Clayton and so many others, who are able to, as experts, take on the fake experts. And that, I think, is where the real progress is being made. I mean, you think about it, something as obscure as the ACIP committee of CHD,
Yes.
about which nobody even knew anything, 2 years ago, nobody even heard of this thing. But it turns out they've been rubber stamping approval, like, oh, it's just we as experts and scientists and doctors approve everything that pharma wants. And it's been going on for years in quiet. And then, in a stroke of genius, RFK just fired them all based on the fact that they all had conflicts of interest. In other words, they were basically being paid off by pharma to rubber stamp all this garbage going into our children, and replace them all with basically, let's face it, I mean, excellent, excellent real scientists that had sacrificed a lot during the COVID period risked their professional reputations and lives to say what was true. And now they're in a position to take on the experts on their own territory, and they're tearing them apart. Every meeting is brutal. Between meetings, we're taking apart the science. It's going on all day. And what we're seeing is that the class of people who locked down the world and poisoned the population, just to put it bluntly, are being worn down. I mean, and they're getting scared. They're even afraid to talk because everything they say is fake, and they know it's going to be debunked in real time. So this battle is taking place like hour by hour every day.
Yeah.
And as long as we keep it up like this, I foresee a future in which we win. We've already won a lot of great battles, but it only gets better from here. Like I see the momentum growing, so that we can actually restore evidence and science and human choice and freedom. Eventually, we're going to get there. I see us. Let me just put it this way. I have been watching public life now for decades. In the last 6 months, I've seen more actual progress than I've ever seen in my whole life. And it's happening because we're engaged. We've got genuine expertise. We're taking them on their own territory, exposing the lies, exposing the fakery every day, and it's actually working.
Yeah, that's very encouraging. And thank you both
Yeah.
for that very upbeat and, shall I say, optimistic, but I think realistically optimistic perspective, because I find myself from day to day struggling with, I don't want to say mood swings. I'm too old for those, but I think shifts in outlook when you see things going on, particularly internationally, that are tremendously disturbing. The situation in Great Britain with the
Yes.
pushing for the digital ID and so on and so forth. Just so much stuff going on. I did my medical school in Canada, as Jeffrey knows, and Canada is, as I said at the last Brownstone meeting, is going to be Venezuela in 3 or 4 years if something doesn't change. So, we're really there's a lot going on in the world that is very, very disturbing and very troubling, but it's good to hear that, at least here we're seeing some progress. And as long as social media is allowed to be open and free, or as open and free as it is, which again, they're going after like crazy in the EU, as long as that's allowed to continue to be open, God bless Elon Musk, this, we can get that message out to other people, and they can see that they don't have to be subjected to the things that they're subjected to. So your optimism and positivity is
Well,
very.
and let me say too, Clayton, that I really do think it's wrong for us to think that our victory is inevitable, right? I mean, we have an opportunity now to do something grand and glorious. We are not guaranteed any wins. A lot of this comes down to the work we do, the precision, the scrupulousness with which we examine the facts, the intensity with which we engage the public debate. And as you say, as long as we have the freedom to do it, we can do it. And I guess my point is that I see a prospect for victory here. It's not in any way guaranteed. And let's face it, when you look at what's going on, the UK today, it's just so heartbreaking, and in so many parts of the world. And I think Americans right now are kind of lucky, but we shouldn't forget that, yeah, we kind of have it better off than anybody, mostly due to the work of these organizations and others and courageous people who stood up. But a long-term victory is not in any sense guaranteed. The worry I have is that America will be the outlier and it'll be temporary. And if that's true, then let's face it, we're going to plunge straight into a dark ages that is going to last and last and last. And I just don't want that to happen. And I think it's within our power to make sure that that doesn't happen. But it's going to continue to take work and sacrifice. And a shout out to the donor community too, right? I mean, that's one. I think this is one of the reasons why America's leading in this sort of, I don't know what you call it, a revolution or counter-revolution, but it's because Americans tend to be very charitably minded. I mean, they understand that to do great things requires genuine sacrifice. I mean, that's the birth of our nation, was with that conviction. Like, we're willing to put our lives and treasure on the line to achieve some of the ideals we want. And that's still true. So we have benefactors that support this organization, without whom none of us would exist. And because of that support and that faith in us, that imposes on us an obligation to follow through. And that's what we're trying to do. And I think this is a major reason why the U.S. is leading that, and the Bill of the Rights. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
Madison,
Jeffrey,
yeah.
I just want to add a little bit onto that. What I had a donor who's become a friend of mine over the years, who's a billionaire, who said to me when COVID came, he said, they were coming after me and my kids too. It was like this, wait a minute, like even I'm not safe from whatever this Leviathan is that has been built up. And there's a number of millionaires, multimillionaires, and billionaires who got in touch with Bobby Kennedy, who got in touch with Brownstone and said, like, wait a minute, maybe we need to be listening to you guys right now. And God bless those people who broke out of the norm of what the elite wanted them to just march along. And some very important people put their money where their mouth was and said, no, I'm not going to go along with it. So
Well, freedom is our birthright. Freedom is our birthright. It just is. As Americans, freedom is our birthright, and we can't forget that. And we're not going to put up with it. We're not going to be like a lot of great empires have died and sunk into the kind of indifference. And I don't want to put names on any particular country like Spain, but but that can't be this country. I mean, we are born with ideals, and we have a birthday, and that birthday was a statement, the greatest statement about human rights ever made in human history. It changed everything. It's the Declaration of Independence. That's still our creed. And Americans just know that. I mean, sometimes we forget it, but then we remember it, and then we're there. And I think that's where we're headed.
That's great to hear both of you. Again, to just to reiterate the positivity, and it's not a guarantee, as you both pointed out, and it's not a sure thing, but we certainly have a puncher's chance in this fight, and we just need to keep punching. With that in mind, Michael, I'd like to hear, what have been some of you mentioned some of them, but what have been, in your mind, we talk about momentum, and when you have momentum, I always think about sports, and when you sports, you have the ball, you got to score. So what is CHD doing to score right now? Where do you see as the big gains that we can make moving forward in the short to medium term, say, to start off with?
Well, one of the important things is, having Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the Secretary of Health and Human Services is just amazing. I never thought I would see that in my lifetime. It is such an important shift in the power dynamic in DC and across this country. But that's not the time to sleep. That's not the time to say, oh, we got this, Bobby's got it. No. From the outside, we need to be keeping the pressure up. We need to be getting together. We need to be planning and pushing forward what we need to do. And that's why I'm really, really, really excited about CHD's conference that we have coming up November 7th through the 9th in Austin, Texas, with such an all-star lineup to it. We have two sitting senators, Senator Ron Johnson and Rand Paul. We have the Surgeon General, Dr. Joe Ladapo from Florida, and just so much amazing talent. The CEO of CHD, Mary Holland, Del Bigtree, Andy Wakefield, Dr. Peter McCullough, Catherine Austin Fitz, Dr. Suzanne Humphreys. I barely scratched the surface of the people that we have that are going to be there. IMA is going to be there. Vaccine Safety Research Foundation is going to be there. We're near selling out on this at this point. The mainstream media is going to be there. Dare I say, we let them in. But we are, because that's where we're coming to now at this point. When Jeffrey was talking about his optimism about how things are changing and how we're leading the way, they can't ignore what's happening anymore. They can't ignore what we're doing. If we stop doing it, they can. They could spin the narrative and, and get the whole thing right back to where they want it. But as long as we keep this going forward, they're forced to cover us. They're forced to quote us. They're forced to come to our events. They're forced to see two federal senators that are co-signing a CHT event in coming to it, as well as Dr. Latipo, the Surgeon General from Florida. So I encourage everybody, go to childrenshealthdefense.org, get tickets if you can. I think it's going to be selling out soon. There are still tickets. There are some special events that have sold out, or get the online streaming version of the event. If you can't come to Austin, you can't make it, it's affordable. You'll then have access to the event for forever. That link will work for you to view that event at any time that you want to. And there's going to be tons of panels, brainstorming, and also just some fun and hanging out with each other. You know, COVID gave us this virtual space and trapped us in it for a little while. Now, there's some great things we've done with it, but these conferences are also the time to remember that we are humans. We need to breathe together, break bread together. We need to be together. And some of the greatest and best ideas and best plans come from having all these great minds in one space. So I really hope whoever can take advantage and come to Austin, Texas, does do so. And if you can't, try to get the online streaming of it.
That sounds great, and it's really a fantastic event with kind of the proverbial all-star lineup going on there, which is pretty impressive. Jeffrey, where do you see the momentum going right now? Where would you like to see it go as we move forward?
I love this this idea of community. I'm going to be in Austin, by the way.
All right.
Brownstone's got a table there. So
all right, excellent.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward.
Jeffrey, the last time I think I saw you was the rally to reclaim free speech in front of the Supreme Court. I think that was the last time.
So that was an interesting. I don't know if I ever told you this. That event impacted me personally, profoundly, and I'll tell you why. You were there, and I was there, and many other people there on the sidewalk. Outside the Supreme Court, all of us were sort of experts in the topic. We'd read all the briefs, we'd read all the discovery. We could, at a drop of a hat, give anybody a full presentation of all the issues, all the constitutional struggles, the legal issues, and the empirical reality of what was going on with censorship in that time. And we're sitting there listening to the debates going on in the Supreme Court. Up marble stairs with these Greek columns with closed doors, and we weren't allowed in. And we're listening to the debates, and all we could hear was a bunch of, just some of the justices didn't understand the First Amendment. They didn't understand the cases. They didn't understand. They had never read the deposition. They didn't understand the discovery. They were asking, frankly, gravely ignorant questions.
Yes.
And I remember maybe I said something to it at the time, or maybe I never vocalized it, but I thought, this is weird. All of the experts are on the sidewalk, and the people with power don't know anything. This is unsustainable. This is unsustainable. The experts are on the sidewalk, and the ignoramuses have all the power in their marble palaces. No society can work like that.
And so, Jeffrey, that was 2024. That was Missouri v. Biden, right? The profound censorship case that's still ongoing now. And the election was ongoing. The campaigns were ongoing, and we were in a dark time back then.
A dark time.
Who knew we were going to be here now?
But it was such a picture for me to realize just the contrast between the knowledge and passion and awareness of the people who were out of power compared to those people who had the power. And I thought, you know what? Societies can't work this way. There's going to be a healing taking place. We're going to reverse places at some point in the future. This is going to change because you can't. This is not a sustainable reality. And of course, it is changing, and we're seeing this. The people on the sidewalk are gradually getting in positions of influence and, dare I say, power.
Well, this is a question I'd like to ask both of you about, if I may interject, Jeffrey, and that's that I still see a lot of ignoramuses in places of power personally. Yeah. But that said, what I have seen through COVID, and I'm hoping it's not just me projecting my own experience on others. I was not a particularly politically active person in any way, shape, or form prior to COVID. And I was very much a mind my own business kind of person. And what I realized during COVID very quickly, I mean, within weeks, was, in my town, greater metropolitan area of 750,000 people, there were 6 people probably that really were willing to stand up and raise hell. And I happened to
Wow.
be one of them. And I realized so very quickly that if I didn't stand up and raise hell, we're sunk.
We're sunk,
And I think that has sunk in for me very deeply, and I think for a lot of people very deeply, that you're not going to be able to just take a year off. You're not going to be able to, I actually know what,
Right.
I didn't know the good stuff going on in the New York legislature that Michael just mentioned, even though it's in its earliest stages. But I know the bad stuff now, and I
Right.
know what I'm concerned about, and I know what I'm fighting about. And I'm not hearing it after it goes through. And I think a lot of people are at this
Right.
point now. 5 years ago, no one was, not saying no one, but relatively many fewer people would be in front of the Supreme Court for a decision, unless it was perhaps an abortion decision.
I think that's right. You
Yep.
know
And so
what
it's
must
woken up people, and I think it may have woken them up permanently. And I think that's
yeah.
really a huge, important thing.
Yeah,
You've been
Americans.
witnessing the change right there because you and Michael were there knowing what was going on, and there's 100 people in front of the pillars,
Yeah.
whereas 5 years before there may have been 2 people.
Well, yeah, or nobody. I think
Right.
what something happened with the lockdowns, especially there were these things that were shocking. It wasn't just that the schools were closed, which was just outrageous. And I have a theory as to why they lasted, so they were closed so long. It's because they're saving them to be quarantine camps. But that's another subject. That's documented, by the way. It's not a speculation.
Yeah.
But when they shut the churches
Yeah.
and told people not to sing together any praises to God, I don't know. That's approaches demonic, and it strikes at the very heart of how freedom was born. It was born with the demand for religious liberty. I mean,
Yes.
500 years ago, and you attack that, you cancel Easter, you cancel Christmas, then you cancel Easter again, then you cancel. It was too much. And at that point, that's when you started to see the mass mobilization. And now we know that that can happen. The question is,
Yes.
what changes must we make to make sure it never happens again? I do want to point out, as long as we're promoting our things, Brownstone has an event in Salt Lake the week before the CHD event where we're featuring Jay Bhattacharya, head of the
Oh,
NIH.
wow.
And we're giving away our very first Brownstone Prize. And I'm so happy about this because we had it minted. I guess we started on this a year ago, and it arrived the other day, and I've just been sort of holding it, just like it's so beautiful.
Oh, it's
So
amazing.
so we're giving that out, and we've got many of our top writers and thinkers and
Oh,
and
that is so cool. I've been honored to be on interviews with Dr. Bhattacharya years back and stuff, but I met him at the Rally to Reclaim Free Speech at that same rally as well too, where we first met in person. And Jeffrey, I mean, just, kind of where Clayton started this conversation. I mean, look at where we're at from what Brownstone Institute, the head of the NIH is coming to be
I know.
honored at your conference.
Yeah.
And we have 2 sitting senators and a Surgeon General coming the next
Yeah.
week. I mean, it's really, we are
It's great.
changing
And
the
Jay,
establishment.
I
Yeah.
met it was 5 years ago this week that I met
Mhm.
Jay in person at the
Right.
conference that resulted in the Great Barrington Declaration. This guy is not a political activist. He's a scientist.
I know.
He's got a PhD in economics and an MD. All right. So, and his main area of academic study was always healthcare and these sorts of things. But he was just a quiet professor. But
Yeah.
at some point, I remember talking to him. I think it was I think it was the first time I spoke to him on the phone. It was maybe early summer of 2020, and he said to me on the phone, he said, "This just can't continue. Something's got to stop, and we're losing everything." The entire population is being demoralized. People are getting sicker. This is insanity. The darkness is descending upon the West. And he said this to me, and he said, what are we going to do? And I said, I don't know. I write more articles. He said, well, they're censoring us. What are we going to do? Well, it was tough. And then finally, it was Martin Kulldorff that came up with what ended up being the solution, which is this breakthrough declaration, which tragically was 8 months into the lockdowns. I mean, it should have happened within, 8 days after the lockdown.
Well, people were shocked. The propaganda, the psyop was very powerful. And even those of us who knew we were in it, we were looking around like, oh my God, it was hard for us to even get our sea legs about us for
And our
it.
communities collapsed. I mean, maybe Michael, you didn't feel this way. I think Clayton, you probably did, but you felt abandoned by your community. Michael, you're kind of surrounded by CHT people, is what it seems
Right.
thinking. But
We predicted it. We knew it was
listen,
coming.
yeah, so you guys are way ahead, but it shocked me. I've been writing
Right.
about pandemic planning for 15 years. I knew that lockdowns were possible, but I didn't think that they would actually ever do it. And when it happened, I expected I would have a community around me rallying, but they vanished.
Yeah.
That was before Brownstone was started. So it was a desperate kind of loneliness and a feeling of having been betrayed by academia, by think tanks, by government, by medicine, by everything, the entire commanding heights of the establishment, and including our own communities. And everybody was just going along, and we all felt so desperately alone. One of the reasons we felt alone was that censorship, because it hit right away. And we were throttled, and we couldn't get through. Great Barrington Declaration, again, 5 years ago this week, only got through because we didn't announce it in advance. It was a short statement, 750 words probably, and it wasn't even planned. That the conference that gave rise to that was supposed to be a teaching event for reporters. I couldn't get any reporters to show up, so we just kind of held the event anyway. And then they wrote this declaration. We constructed that website from one evening to the next morning. I think we decided about 6 p.m. to do it. We bought the domain, and Lou Eastman, who now works for Brownstone, stayed up all night cobbling together this website, and we released it the next morning at like 7 a.m. I mean, it was crazy. That's the reason we got through.
It's just amazing. It's so cool to hear you talking so humbly about this historic moment. And gentlemen, unfortunately, my natives are restless upstairs. I hear my two boys. You might not hear them. I hear them screaming my name right now, and it is their bedtime. So I do have to sign off here.
Family first.
Absolutely. But Jeffrey and Clayton, thank you so much. This is a fantastic conversation. Thanks for letting me promote the conference. And gentlemen, we're to the battles, right? There's much more ahead, and we're gonna be doing it together for a long time, I'm sure.
Michael,
thank you both so much
for coming in on short notice. We should add, you came in as a pinch hitter, and you hit at least a double. I'll give you at least.
All right, I'll take that.
But
I'll take
you
that.
did a great job. So thanks very much, and hope to talk to you again real soon.
Thank you so much, Clayton. Take care, gentlemen.
Well, that was great. And again, just very inspiring to hear Michael give us all of that good news and all of that positivity.
Clayton, there's something to say about CHT too. I mean, they had been doing a lot of work that became essential to our work long before they were well funded or people had really heard about them. They took courageous stands really early on, and they saw it all coming, right? They knew exactly what the purpose of the lockdowns were. It was to prepare the population for yet another shot. That was lost on me. I didn't see that coming because I wasn't in that world. I'm in it now. I get it, but I'm really grateful for all the work that CHD had done all those years under attack all the time, people smearing them and saying terrible things about them, but they persisted, and wow, did their moment ever arrive. But it's required this combination of efforts, the Great Barrington Declaration and the establishment of Brownstone, but then IMA has been so important because the doctors that really see patients, not the theoreticians with their models or the pharma paid shills, of which there are a dime a dozen. People like you know, stood up and said, "Look, I'm sorry, this is not the right way to handle health," you know.
Right.
And now you're working very closely with this organization that's really putting together an alternative system of medicine. That's basically what IMA is doing with all your new fellows. These are leaders in an industry that's rethinking medical care delivery and you know, more integrative approach to medicine. And IMA is going to play a very important role in the future. And that's not for Brownstone to do, but and by the way, I love that IMA Brownstone shares you. I mean, you're a very important figure at Brownstone. We published your book, but IMA uh, takes advantage of you too, and you're so hardworking and a real leader in this field. So you
Well,
deserve
thanks
a
for
lot
the
of
kind
credit.
words. The only thing I would say to maybe add to that would be that, you know, to me it's very ironic that the notion that this is an alternative system, because quite frankly it's the way I was taught to practice, you know, 30 years ago. You know, I was taught 30 years ago that you do not harm the patient. You know, primum non nocere, right? I was
Yeah.
taught that patients have a right to refuse any treatment that they don't want to have. Um, that's what I was taught. I was taught that at, you know, McGill Medical School up in Montreal, which is, you know, now as the piece that I just sent to you, now 5% of deaths in Canada are due to medical assistance in dying, due to physician assisted dying. So 5% and 6% of the organ harvesting is in those patients. So if you can think of anything more dystopian, and this has only come into, they've only allowed physician assisted suicide in Canada for 9 years, Jeffrey. So 10 years ago, it was considered to be off the table morally, and now it accounts for 5% of the deaths in the country and 6% of the organ donations. You know, this is so antithetical to what I was taught in that country about how to take care of patients, about how to treat
Yeah.
people. This is treating people as you know, if you wanted to get I don't know, a pig valve for artificial heart valve. I mean, this is literally what we're talking about here, and it's so ironic, I guess, in a way, or so disturbing in some ways, that what we're trying to do at IMA is essentially practice medicine the way that we were taught to do it, rather than in this sort of, I don't know what to say, technocratic, you know, globalistic, corporate, depopulationist dystopia that is really, in large part, what my profession is morphed into. And if you really sit down and you think about it, there's no other way to look at it. And I agree with you in terms of Children's Health Defense. You know, they were at this from, you know, for decades now. And we've had this conversation before. I have tremendous respect and admiration for the people that have been doing this for decades, because I was a normie until COVID for the most part. You know, I was a
Mm.
skeptic. I was always a bit of an outsider, but you know, was pretty traditional. And, you know, COVID finally woke me up, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to fall asleep again, I hope. But there's people that have been doing this for 20 or 30 years. And, you know, CHD is among that group of people. I remember when we were trying to get some lawsuits going just to open up New York State somewhat, to get the kids back in school, to get people to be able to collect rent if they actually are renting their properties out to people, to get people to be able to go to church. We had some big class action lawsuit, not class action, but some large statewide lawsuits. And it was really difficult because they closed the courts down. So you couldn't get legal relief if the courts were closed. And one of the lawyers, who was just a local lawyer who was working on the case, said, you know, maybe we should contact Bobby Kennedy. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, I knew about him. I knew he had been in the Hudson, you know, River Keepers group and all that kind of thing. But I thought, you know, I didn't know really enough about what he was doing in the vaccine world,
Yeah.
and very quickly learned that that's still in mid 2020. So, you know, they were already known by people who were just scrounging everywhere to find help, to find a authoritative resource. they were already at the front of that. So I'm honored to work with
Well,
CHG.
you remember Clayton, the lockdowns happened in March 2020. Then we had the summer of protests and riots, during which time nobody got COVID. Right? And then we locked down again, and then the shots were released. And I started Brownstone in the spring, and by the fall, what appeared before our eyes, as almost like an apparition from heaven, was RFK's book, The Real Anthony Fauci. And that is a masterpiece of research and writing like I had never seen. And I was so stunned because I didn't know he was working on that book. I didn't know really that much about him. And suddenly I'm holding this treatise and I just burned through it and everything is in there. He was going back to the bioweapons systems, dating back decades. He was the first one for me who flagged that, all the rehearsals of the COVID lockdowns that were taking place in 2019 and the previous attempted lockdowns. He was like this master who knew everything about it. And that came out in the fall, and then it became just this wild bestseller, somehow cutting through all the censors. And even though Amazon kept trying to put it lower and lower in the search results, and the entire ruling class establishment tried to keep that book from getting out. But thanks to the work of CHD, it got out anyway. And that's when it was the fall of 2021 when everything really started to kick into action. And at the same time, the mandates were in full swing, right? So then people were being pressed into getting the shots about which they knew nothing. This new potion promising to cure some respiratory virus with a zoonotic reservoir that was fast mutating, which is an impossibility, which anybody could have told you who knows anything, right? I mean, everybody
Don't
knew.
forget the scaly anteaters. That was when you had to say this is absolute insanity. When they started saying, "Oh, it's not bats, maybe it's pangolins," and I had to remind myself that a pangolin was in fact a mammal because I didn't know what order of animal the pangolin or the scaly anteater was, but they are mammals, it turns out. But
What
it's
a
it,
time.
what a time. And I think, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, I think that it's going to be much harder to pull this stuff off in the future because you've got an awful lot of people that have wised up.
Yeah.
Now you've got Keir Starmer saying, well, look at these migrants. We need real ID. Yeah, right, buddy. So they may pull it off yet, but they're not going to fool anybody.
The censorship has been not entirely defeated. I mean, Brownstone gets posts removed from LinkedIn, several times a week.
Right.
And I understand that this is being live streamed on YouTube, which, this is gonna test YouTube censorship policies pretty heavily. So we're not out of the woods, but we do have some venues. Amazon's, as far as I know, stopped censoring. And we have X, right? I mean, Elon bought X, as he says, not for profit, but for the cause of free speech. And that has been gold for us. I mean, that's pretty much the only social media system I will use anymore. So, we're very lucky in this country that we have this window of free speech. It could have gone the other way, right? I mean, so we're very fortunate.
Oh, we're tremendously fortunate in spite of all that's happened, but we have, 4 or 5 other areas beyond health freedom that we still have to really battle, as you know well. I think one of the things I'd like to ask you, Jeffrey, while we still have a little time, is, as a layperson, I'm a clinical physician first and foremost, and I've given my sort of view on how IMA really is, to my mind, just trying to practice medicine the way we were taught decades ago to do it. As a layperson, what do you think we have going forward for us, and what can we do as physicians to earn? I don't even talk about restoring. I think earning trust of patients from this point going
Well,
forward.
what I most have to say is that I think what the medical community needs more now than ever is some humility and some deference to the wisdom of the patient, I mean, we've almost lost that, and this is why I never even like to interact with the medical system if possible, because I don't like to be condescended to. I don't want to be told that the answer to all problems is a drug about which I don't know anything. Or then you look it up and you find out, there's all sorts of side effects that they're not telling you about. Like this has got to stop. In other words, they need to stop being pharmaceutical salesmen and go back to practicing medicine. I mean, this is the most important thing. I don't know. That seems like it's a cultural change, and IMA is leading that change in a big way. But I think that's going to be the most important thing. It's going to be a long time before public health as we know it is ever trusted again. I don't think it's going to happen in our
Well,
lifetimes.
public health is a whole different animal, and I think that's
Yeah.
really important to note. I mean, public health, if you go back, and I've talked with you about this in the past, if you go back to Rudolf Virchow and stuff like that, I mean, it was a political situation right from the start. Now, maybe Jon Snow taking the handle off the well in London was a pure non apolitical act, but by the time you got to the Germans in the late 19th century, it was all Prussian war machine
Yeah, it
stuff
started
right
going
from the
wrong pretty
start.
early on.
Yeah,
I,
there's really nothing medical about public health. It's really a quasi-military kind of construct.
and
And it's all built on the
utilitarian.
notion, well, it's all built on the notion that there's acceptable losses, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even in the days that even in the days before every vaccine was 100% safe and effective, you would say, no, it's not 100% effective, but it's enough to get quote unquote herd immunity. And oh, yeah, 10 children a year die of it, but 50 million children are protected. So it was always based on a concept of acceptable losses. And
Mhm.
that's a military concept. That's not a medical concept. The
Mhm.
medical concept is you take care of the patient. And if
Mhm.
you think you're going to harm the patient, you don't do it, full stop. So public health has never been really medical. It's really always been statistical military, kind of
They couldn't
instinct.
get away with that, any of this were it not for the liability shield. And I hope that we come to the point sooner rather than later of really taking that on. I would like to see that entirely gone. It's just absurd that you have an entire industry that can just, dish out one potion after another, claim it's safe and effective. And if it turns out not to be, then there's no costs, whatever. That is not a free market at work. That's something else. It's something super creepy. And I think you can elicit wide agreement that is not a sustainable model. And so I hope that at some point we're going to really be taking that on. I mean, that's really got to go. I think every politician's afraid to touch that issue because it's just so scary for them. We don't know. I mean, the courts would be obviously clogged. So often I think I'm glad you brought this up about public health in general and acceptable losses. The voice of Anthony Fauci often rings in my head because every time people would ask him about possible downsides of the COVID shot, he would say there are bad side effects, but they're very, very rare. He said this just again and again and again. And he never defined what very, very rare is. But even that, it's like, well, so that's okay, if people are harmed by a shot they're forced to take, and that's just okay. I
It's
mean, that's
okay in a military situation.
yeah,
It's not okay in an ethical medical situation.
that's right.
That's my point, is that
Hmm.
this is fundamentally a military approach it's a utilitarian in the most inhumane sense of the word approach to things. It's not in any way a caring sense. If medicine is about caring for people, that's antithetical to it. And that's just a fundamental point. So it's interesting just to dovetail back to what you, as the informed layperson, had said. We need humility in medicine, and it's nothing that people haven't been saying for hundreds of years. If you go back and read Tolstoy, Death of Ivan Ilyich, the way that he portrays Ivan Ilyich's physician is truly astounding. The arrogance that this guy presents to this
Hmm.
dying man is just
Hmm.
absolutely blood curdling. And I used to teach
Hmm.
it to medical students all the time. Chekhov, who was a practicing physician, again and again just shows utterly arrogant physicians in his short stories dealing with patients.
You have an article in on Brownstone, I think, that you were talking about how this is even true in veterinary services, right? I mean,
Oh, absolutely. And
you know,
it's interesting how it's a commodity. Patients get commodified also as well. So you become a commodity rather than a
mhm.
than a customer. And I think that that's really, another part of it. I don't know if that's quite as public health, and that's maybe just more corporate. So, we could talk about the corporatization as well.
Mhm.
But specifically to public health, I think that we really need to look at it for what it is, and perhaps look back at its history more, and just say that it's in many ways incompatible with compassionate medical care. Medical care, at least in theory, has a set of ethics. I'm not aware of any set of ethics in public health. It's a utilitarian computation. It's like, if we land these guys at Omaha Beach, they're all going to get slaughtered, but we can't. We have to give that up to get to Paris, kind of thing. And that's not any way to conduct medicine, in my opinion.
Yeah, interesting points.
So, well, we're getting down to the last few minutes, and what I wanted to ask you also was, building sort of a unified path forward. You've been, and you should get some credit in this too, Jeffrey, because I think you've done a wonderful job of always reaching out and including the folks here at Independent Medical Alliance and the folks at CHD and all of the Brownstone events, and been generous, I think, also with your space. And I know Joe Varon just recently published a really nice essay
Yeah,
in Brownstone, and
yeah.
um,
Well,
you
we
know,
just so happen to have a very powerful publishing platform, and probably uniquely so. And we've got a very large audience now. We've built it over 4 years and a lot of credibility, and the establishment's afraid of what we're doing. I mean, it's funny. Michael was talking about earlier about dealing with reporters. I now deal with them, every single day. I can't, there are something like 6 hit pieces now already in preparation. They're all going to unfold over the coming days. What is it? And it makes me laugh. And yeah, I don't entirely know how to deal with the media. If I do answer them, which I mostly don't, I just tell them, look, we've got about 2,200 articles on Brownstone. I mean, surely there's something in those articles you can find to write about without trying to trap me in some sort of weird phone interview. You've
well,
got a
you've
lot
dealt
of,
with this enough. It's like it's like Churchill said that nothing is more exhilarating than to be shot at without result. And so, at this point, I think we have to you have to realize that they're shooting blanks an awful lot of the time, I think.
yeah, it's going to happen anyway. And it's a measure of the influence, I suppose, that we're under fire. I mean, it was just a few weeks ago. I'm sure I told you this, that, I was at a conference. I was being literally chased by reporters, from restaurants and bars and the hotel and everything. It was just like, just guys, just stop it. I mean, this is absurd. It's like, I don't know what you think you're going to find out. I write every single day for Epoch Times, okay, and I write once or twice a week for Brownstone, and we're publishing 2 and 3 articles a day. There's surely enough information out there. You don't have to chase me around to restaurants where I'm trying to dine with my daughter. Okay, so you don't have to do this. This is absurd. Yeah.
So on that hopefully humorous note, but obviously can be a bit tiring. What do you see going forward for this collaboration between these three fine organizations, and just with this whole movement in a whole, say in the next six
Yeah.
months to a
It's
year?
it's so in the next 6 months, you say?
Yeah, say the next short to medium term.
Yeah. Well, I love what IMA is doing and what CHC is doing, and we're going to continue to amplify each other and explore all the ways in which the insights we gain from living through these 5 difficult years continue to affect, everything else in life. You mentioned, this, we've talked about censorship, and there's also the financial surveillance point, and then you've got the problem of geoengineering. We need cleaner skies and stop whatever it is they're doing, and get some more transparency. We can find out exactly what it is they're doing. And transparency on the on pharmaceutical products. We ran an article today by an Israeli scholar who took apart. I don't know if you saw it yet, but it took apart one of the main studies on the safety profile of the COVID-19 vaccine, and blew it up. I mean, he blew up the entire thing in one article. I love this because I don't think that the establishment, the pharmaceutical establishment, can really withstand this kind of expert level scrutiny. And I want to keep it up. I think also the testifying, that our people are doing in the Senate. I think Toby Rogers was brilliant in the Senate the other day. Aaron Siri. Aaron Siri's new book is a godsend.
Oh, it's excellent. Yes.
Have you had a chance to look at it?
I have read several chapters, but I've not gotten through the whole thing yet.
So good. I'm so grateful that that book is out there, and it's getting a wider and wider audience. So yes, the books, the conferences, our supper clubs. We were talking about it before this thing began. They're all selling out to the point that we have a waiting list for every single supper club we're holding, which is requiring a lot of management on our part, which is like, we only have 4 staffers. Okay, so it's kind of a problem. But I'm considering expanding that model over the next 6 months and opening up new cities because I've got plenty of requests.
When you were talking about moving that into off camera, we were talking about moving that into blue states and moving it into places that might be a little bit counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, I found that these separate clubs are more successful in blue areas than red areas because that's where you really need the community. This is where people are lonely and they need friendships. And again, a lot of our communities fell apart over the last 5 years. We've lost friends. I mean, families have broken up. A lot of tragic things have happened. So we need new opportunities to develop tight friendships with people.
I'm seeing the questions right here. I'm watching Autumn, and she's desperate to put some questions in here. I wanted to. There were 2 things here. Someone just replied though, in response to the supper clubs. How about New York City was one of them, which I think is a beautiful thing. And someone else said, how about abroad? How about Dublin?
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that those are some things really to look at. I think we really have a responsibility. We got James Madison, and the other countries don't.
Yeah.
We have Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, and other countries don't. And we really need to reach out, I think, to other countries.
We have a Brownstone Spain. We're starting a Brownstone Italia. Our first meeting is in the spring. What was the first thing you said about? What was the first thing about supper clubs? Yeah, I'm going to expand them around the country, and then New York City. New York City is a problem.
Well, we know that, but
but the economics of New York City are very difficult. To find a place that's affordable, it's not safe. So it's just such a mess.
Hoboken's nice. Do it across the river.
Maybe that's you guys talk to me about it later, but I cannot find a venue in Manhattan that works for a supper club, not yet. But I know it would be a success if I could ever figure it out.
Very well. Autumn, do we have any time for any questions or not?
Yes, we do. We'll go through them pretty quick. One of them that I wanted to get your thoughts on, we had an anonymous attendee asked what both of your thoughts are on Chelsea Clinton starting her new podcast called That Can't Be True, where she plans to tackle topics like the childhood vaccine schedule, fluoride, and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's a tribute to IMA, Brownstone, and CHC. I mean, it's just the power of this movement and also the passion that people feel. There is no way this podcast is going to fail. It's not going to get an audience. It's just propaganda. She knows nothing about it. The fact that she was tagged to do this, and I forget, somebody released who all the funders are, and they're all the usual suspects, right? So it's just absurd. I can't say I listened to it because I just can't bear it, and also I already know what it says. But you can't just keep doing this. The bad guys think that they can just keep trotting out these pseudo-famous people to say, stop saying that. That's really bad. That's disinformation. It's not going to work. I mean, it's just not going to work.
It hasn't worked so far with other people they've tossed out. So I think the other thing I think is really interesting is that the last thing they're going to do is get Peter Hotez to do it because he knows he's going to get destroyed. Yeah. It goes right down to the early days of the whole thing when Steve Kirsch was trying desperately to get him to give him $1 million to debate him. The legitimate, so-called legitimate people won't do this because they know they're going to get destroyed. So the best they can do is get some puppet, and that puppet will fail.
Yeah. You're
That's
talking
what's gonna
about
happen.
like Dr. Jake Scott, for example.
Jake Scott, yeah.
Yeah.
What
All,
happened to Jake? Where is he now?
he's vanished again. I mean, he disappeared. I mean, that's a pathetic story. If and I'm not going to tell the story here, but if anybody will looks it up, I
He's the
think
next Jake Scott. There you go.
Jake Scott.
One other question that I thought would be interesting for you both to comment on personally. Raphael asked, can you comment on the very concerning deal between Pfizer and the Trump administration?
Yeah,
Jeffrey, you have an outlook on this.
yeah, there's a number of different views on this. One is just, I don't know. I'm not going to comment on that. I found it regrettable. Washington is a nasty place. Politics is a nasty business, and I don't know what all that was about. I hate the fact that was a very, very painful thing to watch, and I can't swallow it. I ran an article by a fellow who's trying to explain it as best he could. I wasn't entirely persuaded by the article, but I think it's really bad for the Trump administration to have anything to do with Pfizer, you know. So
Yeah, I agree. I think it was an unforced error on Trump, because I think that what he did, he has that tendency to just to bloviate when he gets someone in front of him, even if they're not. And I say this as a broad supporter of his, but he has a tendency to say, "Oh, great guy, Tony Blair, great guy. Tony Blair's a demon, and he knows that." But he does that all the time. So he does the same thing with Bourla. All he had to do is bring Bourla in there and say, they're going to spend their money in the United States. This is good for the United States. And instead, he has to have Bobby in there in this humiliation ritual, and he has to tell the world how great a guy Albert Bourla is when he's a ghoul. And
yeah.
so I think that was a tremendous unforced error on the president's part, and I think it was a big mistake.
Mhm.
I don't think it was a lot more than that. But I think that their presentation matters, and we've seen before though, Jeffrey, haven't we? That he can be kind of tone deaf about things. He can.
Yeah.
A lot of MAGA does not. MAGA despises Pfizer.
Yep.
It's not just Maha. MAGA
Right.
despises this stuff, and
That's
he
right.
just kind of. I don't know if it's his chief of staff. I don't know if it's someone else telling him, "Oh yeah, this is fine." It's not fine, and it was an unforced error.
Well, and you know what's strange is that it happened about 1 week after his brilliant, brilliant press conference in which he stood up and said the MMR shot needs to be divided into 3 shots. The Hep B shot should not be given childhood. Should be wait till you're 12. No vaccine should have contain any aluminum or mercury. He said all these things from microphone. But did you know what was amazing about this, Clayton? I mention this to you. The mainstream media did not report any of that. They are so censorial that they would not even report what Trump said about the vaccine schedule. It was the most revolutionary comments you've ever heard. It was exactly what Andrew Wakefield has been demanding, and CHD has been demanding.
And Trump went a lot further than he allowed. He put a tremendous amount of cover. He was brilliant there because he gave Bobby and the others a lot of cover. He went way out there, and they could look like the reasonable, cautious, careful people. So he did a great job 1 week, and he totally wet the bed the next.
Yeah, take the good with the bad.
Get with someone who talks off the cuff like the president does.
That's life with Trump, isn't it? Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to move on to our closing announcements just because we are a little bit past the top of the hour. Thank you both so much for joining tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Always a pleasure, Autumn.
All right.
Thank you. All right, so as our guests tonight mentioned, we have 2 powerful new pieces published by the Brownstone Institute. The first is The Lost Invocation of Medicine by Dr. Joseph Verone. This article reflects on how medicine has drifted from its sacred roots of healing and service and how we can reclaim it as our true vocation once again. The second is by Tom Markson, who is a member of the IMA Board of Directors. This article examines President Trump's recent comments on the link between Tylenol use and pregnancy and autism, calling out decades of medical complacency and the illusion of settled silence. Both pieces capture a defining moment in modern medicine, and we invite you to read them in full and share them with others. You can find both articles at brownstone.org or imahealth.org as well. New research, new IMA researchers are introducing DareSafe, the first of its kind system for comparing vaccine and drug safety. Developed by Dr. Joseph Verone, IMA co-founder and chief scientific officer, and Matt Halma, our research director. This groundbreaking study reveals striking differences in reported adverse events and death rates, showing COVID-19 injections had 63 times higher reported death rates per dose than the flu shots did. You could scan the QR code and read the blog breaking down this topic, or to view the full DareSafe study. Bone health, it's more than calcium. Discover 7 often overlooked factors that influence osteoporosis in this quick guide from IMA Senior Fellow Dr. Christina Carmen. In this guide, you'll learn how hormones, gut health, inflammation, and lifestyle all play a role and explore new natural strategies to support bone health. Download the free guide at the link on screen or by searching 7 Keys to Understanding Osteoporosis Beyond Calcium on our website. Thanks to all of our incredible IMA community, we did it. We hit our target. As we shared in an email, we will continue to honor all $1,000 and up donations made by October 17th, which includes access to an exclusive invite-only webinar with Dr. Merrick on cancer. All right, well, before I say goodnight, and we also, just Olivia, bring that one back up. So next week, we do have the truth about organ donation. You can join Dr. Verone and Janja Kellick for this eye-opening conversation that challenges what you thought you knew about organ donation. That's Wednesday next week, October 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern. You won't want to miss that discussion. All right, well, before I say goodnight, I wanted to leave you with a short clip from Dr. Jennifer Hibbard, another senior fellow of ours in dentistry and nutrition. In this clip, she shares her remarks at the Reclaiming Conference in Calgary. She speaks about the power of patient empowerment and the importance of speaking up and the future of health education. It's a good reminder about why this work matters and what we're all building together. Thank you for being with us tonight, for your support, and for standing with the IMA. We'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hibbard. Very honored to be a senior fellow of the Independent Medical Alliance. And I'm very grateful with my association with all the doctors there and all the doctors and scientists internationally that feed into everything that we're able to provide and bring forward. It's a process and a gentle process for me to try to talk to family members, the ones that have been injured. Some of them are still not receptive, but others I will talk to them about different therapies, and I come to them with something that's easier for them to accept, such as the red light therapy and other modalities, try to convince them to not have any more vaccines. So that's been eye-opening, and I think all of us have experienced that, from being the one that brought the family together to be the black sheep. And I think that's a story every one of us tell, and maybe it's because of the nature of who we are. As far as my colleagues, that's another process. Very few are aware and awake, and those that are really don't want to raise their head above the pulpit. They don't want to go through what some of us have gone through. But more and more are coming to speak to me. In the hospitals where I work, I have private practice, hospital practice. I'm teaching more at the university because I feel that these are the change makers of the future, and I want to open their minds to think outside the box. I teach them what they have to learn in school, but then I teach them to make sure they go to another institution afterwards, specialize, gives you more freedom, and also to then question the narrative and question everything that you think is the right way you're supposed to do it. If you ask the question, you'll get a lot of varied answers. But if you don't ask the question, you just believe what you're told, you're not going to learn. So that's our job here, is to bring the truth forward, to help people ask the right questions, to look for the answers and not get caught up in the complacency of following what the government is telling us, because we know that they're not there for our best interest. And I speak with my patients daily, and that's actually probably most rewarding, is to help empower them.